What role-playing system is right for you? How do you know? How do you decide? Maybe you're an experienced GM and you need some kind of refresher, or you need to go in a new direction. You want to push yourself to being even better. But perhaps you're a beginner GM. You have no idea where to start. There are all these different role-playing systems. How do you know? How do you know which is the right one for you? Well, this is how. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of How to Be a Great GM. My name is Guy, and before we kick off, there's some leaf blower idiots running around outside blowing the leaves around. I mean, the wind does that for free, but if you want to pay someone to blow leaves around, then that's entirely your choice. So if you hear in the background this low-level buzzsaw, that's what's going on. Hopefully they'll be finished before the video is. Now, we are talking about choosing the right system for you. How do you know which is the one that works for you and which is the one that doesn't work for you? Well, as far as I am concerned, there are two categories that we fall into when we start looking at what is the right system. And it's not the category of system, it's the category of you. If you are an inexperienced GM, if you are a young novice GM, if you're trying to get into it, or if it's the first time that you're running a game, how do you know what type of role-playing system to choose? And if you're an experienced GM, should you be sticking with the same role-playing systems that you've used for the past 10 years? Or should you be branching out? Well, I've got answers on both of those as far as I'm concerned. So let's jump straight into it. New GMs should always, in my opinion, adopt a simple system. Don't go straight into the heavy mechanical kind of systems that are out there. And that's something that's very important to know, is that there are really, again, in my opinion, two kinds of role-playing games that exist. There are the heavy mechanics games where there's lots of integration and there's lots of mathematics and advantages and disadvantages that you can have as a character. And then there are the lighter versions, which are a lot more fun, less focused so much on building epic characters and more on just, enjoying the game and telling a good story. So how do you know? Well, in my opinion, if I were to look at it, I would say something like Talisman. Talisman is a simple system. It's 3d6 and that's pretty much it. You kind of go with it and just have fun. Whereas Dungeoneer is 1d6. Sometimes you might roll 2. So it's even simpler. Maximum Apocalypse is a very simple percentile system. Lone Wolf is a d10. That's all you're using. A single 10-sided dice and a reference table. Dungeons and Dragons I classify as a simple system if you start playing at low level and you ignore everything that's going on above that. Now, I would recommend Dungeons and Dragons, not for any other reason other than what you're going to see later on in the video. So stick around for that if you want to know why I would suggest Dungeons and Dragons. All of the other ones that I've spoken about, they're all very simple. Fate is another one that you can jump straight into. So there's lots and lots and lots of different simple systems that you can get into. Why do I say simple systems? Well, as far as you're concerned, and as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to game mastering, the major element about game mastering is not knowing all the rules. And I've said it before, if you want to start GMing, you don't need to know the rules. A lot of other people will argue with that. But if you know the basic simple rules for combat and for resolving an outcome, so the character wants to climb a cliff and you know the basic rules for that, you're golden. You can start role-playing straight away. So if you look at simple systems where there's only a single die roll, or it's a yes-no outcome, or there's a percentage chance outcome and it's very, very easy, then you're not being bogged down in trying to remember all of the rules and the variations on the rule and the this and the that and the next thing. All you're doing is you're being able to move your game forward, you're being able to have fun, and you're being able to explore the concepts of adjudication, of plot management, of triggering events, of player management, of table management, all those other concepts that you as a GM have to master. You're free to start looking at those rather than trying to remember all these heavy rules. As an experienced GM, however, I would suggest that you then start looking into the more interesting kinds of mechanics out there that step away from the traditional kind of thing and start moving towards interpretation as well as perhaps more robust mechanics. Things like Pathfinder 2, lots of cross-integration, especially at higher levels, same as Dungeons & Dragons for that matter, Star Trek Adventures or any of the 2D20 systems, simple on the surface, but when you start getting into it, there's a lot more behind the, under the hood, as they say. Dark Eye, the Dark Eye, Das Schwarze Auge, of course, is another one that's got pretty much a lot of roots in old school kind of rules and things. Torg Eternity is another one that I would classify in that category, and the list kind of goes on and on and on and on. So I would recommend that you explore these other systems. Why? You're going to have to wait for later in the video. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. Okay, so that is the first step, is trying to find a simple system versus a more convoluted system. Then I would say the focus that new players, young GMs, I keep saying young GM, but I don't actually mean a GM who is, say, under the age of 50. That is someone who I would classify as a young GM. What I mean there is that I mean that someone who's only been GMing for a few months or maybe a few years, but hasn't yet really got the confidence to call themselves a GM. They go, well, I sometimes GM, but I'm still very new. That's a young GM, in my opinion. It doesn't matter what your age is. Who cares how old you are? So, you know, that's a clarification there. So for novice GMs, for new GMs, I would suggest focusing on an adventure at a time. Don't go, oh, well, I want to do a Critical Role mega adventure because that's what I really want to do. No, that's not the right way to go about it, in my opinion. You're going to suffer the same thing that I suffered from when I first started GMing, and that was just constantly having these campaigns fail and not understanding why. And the reason for it, in my opinion, is that, well, as a young GM, you don't yet have the capacity to be able to orchestrate all these complicated things and maintain things that you would need to run a long-term campaign. Now, I know there are GMs out there who the first game they started, they've still been running for 20 years and it's a mega campaign and all that kind of wonderful stuff. That does happen. But for the majority of us, for those of us who are not given these amazing powers, it's a case of saying, I'm going to just run an adventure. I'm going to run one adventure, and I'm going to run another adventure, and I'm going to run another adventure. And they don't have anything to do with each other. They're just adventures. And slowly you get used to the idea of an adventure and how to run an adventure, and then you can step up to where the experienced GMs are. And if you are an experienced GM, then I would expect by now you should be running campaigns. You should have the capacity to say, right, I now know how to run an adventure successfully. Now I need to push myself, I need to test myself to string 12 adventures together under a single umbrella of a narrative. Because that's ultimately where we want to get to. If you want to be a great GM, you want to be able to run an epic campaign and all that kind of jazz that goes with it. So that's something to bear in mind. That's something to look at. The leaf blower is getting closer. I can hear it. All right. So let's see. Yes. Beginner GMs, novice GMs. My advice with regards to finding the right system is to try as many systems as you can. Look at which ones are going to be interesting to you. Look at the ones that are rules light. Speak to people, ask on forums, ask in your local gaming store. Hey, what's a sort of a light role-playing system? What's a heavy role-playing system? And play as many as you can. The more exposure you can get to different types of role-playing games, the stronger the role player you'll be. Why? Well, basically, it means that you're more aware of, oh, this is a mechanic in this system, in that system it's like this, and what you start to see is that all role-playing games generally have some kind of resolution mechanic for an action that's being taken. How that resolution takes place is up to the specific game. But once you start getting those basic concepts in your head in terms of, oh, there's a resolution mechanic, there's a combat mechanic, there's a this mechanic, then you start to go, okay, well now I can approach different systems with more confidence. How do you learn a new system? Well, again, understanding the basic underlying principles of what role-playing games are allows you to then predict, okay, well this says it's using 2d12, so I'm either rolling a certain number above or below, or I'm looking for specific figures on the dice. There are all kinds of ways that you can go about it. Again, the more exposure you have, the better. Now, for experienced GMs, I recommend that you look at even more systems. Don't stick with one system. If you've been playing the same role-playing system for the entire year, I think it's time to step up. You need to start expanding. So that's expanding and exploring combined together. Expanding. We shall expand the continent of Lemuria. Yes, we shall go forth and expand. So expand your horizons by playing different role-playing games. Now, in the past, I would say go to conventions and play different games there. Of course, that's maybe something that's going to be coming back in the near future. This video was recorded in 2020, by the way, for those of you that are watching this in the far distant future when masks are but a memory. Nonetheless, expand your horizons. Play different games. Even if you look at it and you go, oh, I don't like that system. I have made that mistake so many times in my career, and I hate it. I absolutely hate it. Now, upon reflection, having started this YouTube channel, I've been forced to start looking at different role-playing systems, and what a blessing it has been. I cannot tell you how much more I've got out of it. And even when I'm reading a role-playing system, I'm going, oh, it's terrible. This is so clunky. It's, oh, you'll never do that. The GM doesn't get to roll dice. Oh, no, that's ridiculous. What's up with that nonsense? And then you start reading it, and you start to get those fundamentals in your head, and you start going, you know what, actually, this solves that particular problem that my role-playing game has had. I quite like the way that it does that. Okay, cool. So now I can start to do that, or I can start to do this. And you start to explore and expand. Do it. Trust me, it's worth it. Okay, I would also suggest when we're moving on to the next topic specifically, I would say that as a beginner, don't waste your time making all those beautiful props. I know it's super exciting. DM's Craft and all those wonderful channels that show you how to make terrain minis and old parchment paper and all that kind of jazz. It's super cool. But as a young GM, as a novice GM, you're going to find that you're going to have difficulty bringing that into your game. And sometimes your players are going to miss it altogether simply because you don't have the experience of how to position it so that the players can't possibly miss it. Or you're so desperate to get it included in the game that you just give it to the players at a random time if they've missed it. And then they're like, well, I don't know what to do with this. Further to that, you also need to decide whether your players are going to react to something like that or not. I have had in the past where I have spent days making all kinds of cryptic parchment pieces and puzzles that are being torn out of books and all those kinds of things, and given them to my players, and they've kind of gone, oh yeah, that's nice. Okay, I roll for intelligence to solve the puzzle. No, you need to put it together. Oh, I hate puzzles. No, I really don't like, I don't know. No, I mean, that looks great, but I'm not touching it. So don't waste your time on all that kind of stuff. Focus on getting your plot right, getting your triggers right, having the adventure. Experienced GMs, well, now this is where, again, you need to step up. This is the whole thing about this channel, right? Is how to become a better game master. So you then need to start saying, okay, well, my players are pretty cool with theater of the mind. But if I just get them this little prop, or if I start to use minis correctly, if I start using maps that actually make sense and that don't pull the game from being a role-playing game into a tactical war game, well, now I can start to expand my horizons. You should by now be able to read your table anyway in terms of your players and figure out if that is something that will get them excited or not. Now, on both counts, I'm not advocating that the GM should be doing a huge amount of work. It just comes with the job that you will inevitably be doing more work than the players will ever do. But having said that, just making a parchment every now and again and slipping it in or giving them an old map that they can actually look at will just raise your game that much higher. And then finally, as far as I'm concerned, beginner GMs, don't go and buy 20 books. Why? Well, as far as I'm concerned, you're going to either suffer from analysis paralysis, where you are just overloaded with all of these rule books and these options that you have no idea how they actually work in practice, or you're going to do what happens every time I go and buy a complete gym outfit, including sneakers, trainers, socks, and all the other bits and pieces that go with it. With all of the intention of actually going to gym, it never actually happens, or it happens twice, and then I kind of get bored and end up with a range of clothing that I can't wear in public. So make sure that when you are starting out, just start with the core rulebook. Get the very basic. A lot of role-playing games now come out with a beginner's set. That's where you start. Don't feel, oh, well, I'm using the beginner's set. I'm sorry, I'm still... That is absolutely amazing. And anyone who says, oh, ha, 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 look, he's only using the beginner's set. What a noob. Turn around and tell them that they are the greatest human being on earth because they prove that humans can actually sink below a certain acceptable public performance or appearance level, and that they are the absolute lowest, and so everybody else is going to be amazing. So thank them for that, and then go back to playing your game. It doesn't matter what you're using, just get in there and start playing. Experienced GMs, well, Again, I would say stick to the core and then write your own. Yes, start homebrewing, start going, okay, I'm going to tweak this, I'm going to tinker that. I know most of us do it already anyway, but don't start changing things until you understand how they work, because oftentimes you can pull out a mechanic and go, oh, I don't need that anymore. Meanwhile, it was actually integral at higher levels, or you get the point. These are my particular thoughts on how you should approach the system that you're going to be using as either a novice player or as a more experienced player. What are your thoughts? Leave the comments down below. We got such great comments in the last videos. There was talking, there was discussions going on. What RPGs would you recommend that new players play? And put the word new player and then list your favorite RPGs for new players. And then experienced. Hey, let's get a list going in terms of these are games that I think experienced GMs should look at because they have some weird mechanics, or just put the names down. Let us start to explore, because I mean, I know there are hundreds of role-playing games that have been brought into existence since the 1960s, the 1970s. Let's start to explore those. And for the new guys, let's let them know where they should be looking and why they should be looking at that. Anyway, remember to hit that like button if you like this video. Hit the subscribe button if you want to basically make us happy. We are so close to that 200K goal. It's very nerve-wracking, as a matter of fact, to be in that next bracket, joining some amazing other YouTube GM channels out there. Anyway, let's talk about sponsors. Today's sponsor is us, as a matter of fact. We are launching on the 15th of December a new Kickstarter that we've been working on now for nearly 6 months. What is it? It is the Epic Battle Maps book. Now, what we did was we said, we want maps. We like maps. We want printable maps, or at least we want maps that have been printed, that have already been printed. Let me say that properly. We want beautiful maps. And so, if I can get the reflections out, this is a bridge that I designed. Here's a piece of a boat. Why is it only a piece of a boat? Haha, it is not. It is actually a full boat. Now, the reason that we started this Kickstarter was we wanted a nice small book that could fit into a bag or onto your bookshelf easily and sit alongside all of your other books, but that also had gigantic, wonderful, folding maps. So these maps fold out of the book, and because of the design of the book, let me speak underneath the pages, because of the design of the book, you can fold it underneath itself, and then this sits flat on the table, and you get your beautiful map of the ship. This is a nice big ship, and it sits absolutely flat. Now, I know it doesn't look like it's sitting flat, but once it's on the table, it really does. Sorry, I have to do this, otherwise you can hear the change in the audio. It's like the old fan. Anyway, we're going to be telling you more about this Kickstarter campaign next week as it builds, and it's launching on the 15th of December. You can find it in the link down there. And if you are looking for it, you can draw on this thing with erasable markers. Yes, if you get 2 of them, you get to make double the size. But I'll show you that one next week. Anyway, a big shout out to all of our Patreons who make these videos possible, and of course to yourself for watching all the way to the end. Until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest of gaming.